Women don't talk about money the way we should. Not honestly, not openly, and not with each other. But that's changing. I'm Syama Bunten, founder of Wealth Catalyst. And Getting Rich Together is where the conversation lives. Every week, a different woman, a different path, and a conversation that will change how you think about your own financial power. This community is growing and you belong in it. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review so more women can find their way here. Now, let's get rich together. I am here today with the brilliant and beautiful Lucy Rogers. Lucy, you are a brilliant entrepreneur, investor, family office consultant, working at the intersection of capital, culture, and impact. You're the co-founder of Just Us, a global network connecting more than 3,000 family offices, investors, and founders. Holy bananas. That's a lot of people. And through your curated investor experiences and relationship-driven deal flow, you're able to change the world and move the needle in a direction that gives us so much more hope, possibility, and really something to believe in. What's so interesting about your early career, Lucy, is how you've really woven all of these amazing experiences across entertainment, creative technology. And I mean, I really don't know how many people can say that they created content that generated over 3.5 billion views. I think I need you to sideline and tell me how on earth you did that, because I think I need to know how to do that. I'm so excited to have you here today on Getting Rich Together. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Syama. It's a pleasure meeting with you and recording with you. And same to you. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. So thank you for all your work that you're doing.
Wow, absolutely. So before we get into all of the incredible things you're doing now and all the places you're traveling to and all of these incredible activations, I'd love to start with a little girl, Lucy. I'd like to start with a girl who was somewhere between the ages of 7, 12 years old. Maybe she had fabulous bangs. Maybe she didn't. But tell me, what was life like for you as a little girl? And what was money like?
Interestingly, I actually don't remember a lot of my childhood. So you're picking a time period where I don't have a lot of memory there. But I know my mum told me that when I was a kid, I would never play with toys. I'd just want to create businesses. And when I did have toys, I'd stand by the side of the road and flag down cars and sell them to people that for some reason would buy them. So I've kind of always been quite entrepreneurial and independent and kind of finding my own way and doing things that are perhaps out of the normal childhoodness. I did start working when I was 8 years old. I did gymnastics, and you could be an assistant gymnastics coach at 8 years old and get paid like £4.50 an hour. So I started work early and just really liked seeing how I could just really have my own wealth. So not that it was wealth at that time, because I probably earned like £50, but I could buy my own sweets. So that's what's counted at the time.
I remember Lucy getting like $50 for one birthday and being like, I can move out now, and I think I was like,
right, I don't need you, mum and dad, anymore. I can do this.
What was grade school like for you? Like, were you someone who was always, were you precocious? Was it an adventure? Like, how did you kind of navigate being so entrepreneurial so young? I imagine that might have gotten you into a little bit of trouble.
Yes. So grade school, what age is that? Because we have primary and secondary school.
Yeah. So I'd say like grade school. So primary takes you to what age? Is that like 12, 13?
11. Yeah. So primary is up until 11, and then 11 till 16 is secondary. And then you can do A levels or go to college for 16.
Oh my God. That's amazing. That's so, I feel like I need to know more about that. I went to high school and did my international baccalaureate, and I was like, what is this? Like, why am I doing this? Anyway, I digress. So up to like 16-ish or so, like, what were you sort of getting into? What kind of student were you? Like, was it Lucy, the bad girl? Were you still working? What did it look like?
I got kicked out of 2 schools, so I went to 3 secondary schools. If you're familiar with the 4 personality types, I've always been a questioner. So I've always stood in purpose and my belief system. So the first school, I skipped school and went to a protest about the war in Iraq at the time, and animal testing as well. So I've always been very I was vegetarian from 8 years old, just because I realized that it was killing animals and I liked animals. So I've kind of always been a very this is what I believe in and I'm standing by it person. And yeah, so the first 2 schools, it was very much there's a lot of rules and I don't understand why we're doing the rules because they don't really make a lot of sense. And so creating my own rules when you're young at school doesn't really go so well for you. So can result in being expelled. But when I hit the 3rd school, that's kind of when I settled down a lot, actually. And I think that's also what's made me into such a big connector, because you start when you start schools in the middle of when everyone's had their friendship groups, you go in a hard position where you're trying to now make friends with people that have been friends for years. So you work out, okay, what is it that they like, or they, not that they need at that time, but it's more interest, how do I fit in here? And fundamentally, I think connectors really they continue that, how do I fit in here? Whereas in a work environment, that becomes okay, so what's your greatest need? Oh, I can help with that. And you become useful. And that's kind of how I've switched careers probably so often, but always found myself in the right pockets because of being at school and moving 3 different schools and just being able to read people well. And yeah, just I got very quiet in the last school, actually, and kind of lost my passion and voice and what I've now got back now, and that kind of makes me primed to be working in impact. I think I had to grow back from it being suppressed when I was in school age. But yeah, I can now see the synergies.
That's so incredible. I mean, thinking about your level of awareness of your experience then, and sort of thinking about how necessity almost breeds this extra special quality. And I'm sure at the time when you were younger, I imagine, moving schools, it was probably daunting. It's stressful, I mean, let alone it's hard enough to be a teenager, let alone having to have so many different experiences. Did you have an idea at that age of maybe what it was you thought you wanted to be when you grew up? What kind of options or possibilities do you think were in front of you?
I mean, when I was younger, I know I wanted to be an artist with an Airbnb that I could sell my paintings at. Then the vision became a bit vaster after that. I think it took until when I was in college, so 16 to 18, to really decide kind of where my focus was. So I actually dropped out of college when I was 17, and I went traveling on my own for 3 months over Thailand, Australia, and New Zealand. And I took a camera with me. I didn't know anything about photography, and it gave me this creativity that I could just document and just really get kind of in my element. And I got an unconditional offer into university from that portfolio. And although I love creative, I love being creative, that was the first part of my journey. So when I was at university as well, I didn't finish university either, because I just kind of, when I was on this course, I studied commercial photography. It just felt like I needed work experience. It didn't feel like I needed to be educated on that, but I just wanted to go out and do. And it just kind of felt a bit, honestly, like a waste of my time at that point. Kind of, yeah, not been great at education so far, as you can see.
Or education hasn't been great for you,
right,
I think
right.
that, it could go both ways.
Right. Had there been more work experience, probably would have been more interested. But no, I moved to London that summer. I lived in Bournemouth at the time at university. And I went to a advertising agency that typically you'd have to know someone or your parents or whatever to get in. And I got this work experience role for a week. And I made myself invaluable. And I found tasks that people couldn't replace me on. And I wouldn't I'd make it so in my head, I guess, that it was I was oh, I can stay next week if you want me to continue this. And that kind of happened for 2 months until a position came up and for an assistant. And I was like, hey, I'd really like to go for this. And they gave it to me. And everybody else, it was kind of a little bit more what's your degrees, or who's your family, or who kind of brought you in, or whatever. But that's kind of where I ended up taking the creativity into more of a work capacity and creative direction, which there's still a through line in creativity in the work that I do now, but it's more how do we creatively storytell about investments and raising for capital and things like that.
So how old were you when you landed this first university gig?
20, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 20.
And what did you do?
I was meant to do another year and didn't.
So what did you do with the money? Was it like, did you see the money as some sort of, was it freedom? Did you not think about it? Was it going towards expenses? Like, now you're starting to finally make some money, right? More so than selling the dolls on the, to the people on the street. So how did you perceive, I guess, this initial amount of capital?
So I worked out how I could spend barely any money, and I'd go to the supermarkets at when they're closing, when everything was discounted, and I'd buy my food then, and I saved up for a deposit on shared ownership for a flat. And so at 24, I bought 35% of my first flat apartment, and literally just was a hoarder at saving. I'm really good at saving. And that's actually probably been more of my issue with money, that I'm almost like hoarding too much rather than being free with it. So I've actually had to teach myself the opposite of rather than just spending without feeling guilty about spending, or like I should be putting it towards something more serious. But yeah, that's what got into my first job. I think it took me 2 years to save maybe 40,000, 50,000 pounds or something like that. And that was enough for a deposit on. And I was at the minute, if I didn't do overtime, I would never have met that minimum, but I was just consistently doing overtime and just extra jobs. And I ended up also randomly, I trained in being a personal trainer because I was doing Instagram at the time on fitness, and it was when Instagram was coming out. And so someone sent me on a free course to be a personal trainer. So then I had that skill. So I'd do personal training clients before my advertising job and doing all the things to save money. So
who are you? Okay. Nobody I know is 24 and they're like, I have saved, 40, 50,000 pounds, and I'm going to now start to buy a flat, and I'm starting this very adult, what seems to me is you've always been very self-directed and very much no one knows better than I do. And
which can be a default.
Yeah. Totally. But this very sort of authoritative, right? You're holding a lot of authority in your life to be able to dictate, what are the priorities and what comes next. And, do you think there was any sort of modeling from that within your family structure? Or was it sort of despite the family structure, you then sort of secured these futures for yourself? How do you sort of reconcile such adult behavior and so much sense of self-responsibility at such a young age?
After all the self-development work now, I can give you a very solid answer for what that is. But essentially, I didn't feel safe first. So I felt like I needed to create my own safety. And that was just okay, this is what we're doing. We're very independent. We've got everything. We don't need to rely on anyone. And now I can unpack that what that was and why I wasn't just a normal 20-year-old having fun. It was safety. And that inherently is kind of what most human needs are really based upon, safety.
Totally. And I think what's also interesting is in the United States, I've never heard of someone buying a share, and sort of buying into the ownership and making on-ramps more accessible for young people. I feel like today it's I was telling something the other day, in San Francisco for 1.5 million, you get 800 square feet, It's how are you supposed to be 24 and trying to, navigate the world? It's wild.
Well, we also have different mortgages. So, because my business partner, we do affordable housings, and so he is in some parts of the business replicating the UK mortgage term, which can be 35 years. So yeah, you get a much longer mortgage, and then they have shared ownership, which means you can buy, part rent, which can get you stuck, quite honestly. Like it is good to get on the housing ladder, but then the value goes up because you just bought it off plan and the value goes up quite quickly. So it can be about like catching your tail, but
I got it. Yeah, how fascinating. Okay, so so you buy this place, you start to do your deposit on this home. You're young, you're wicked smart. What happens next?
I mean, like, so I moved careers. So I found the advertising industry way too corporate, to like everything was storyboarded out. I needed a bit more freedom and like expression, essentially. And I also didn't like some of the things that we were selling. Like from a moral standpoint, it just felt like, why are we getting people to buy this? It didn't make a lot of sense to me. And this agency, like, they had a lot of money, so they'd put like thousands into educational film on a bin, which trashed, like, recycling essentially. And so I started working with these young directors because that was one of my projects, to produce a film on using the right bin. And they did a lot of music videos. So I said, like, if there's anything that comes out, I'd produce it for free. Just let me know. And I ended up moving. A producer role came up and they hired me at the production company they were at. And then I was there for probably 2.5 years, but I was working with like Dua Lipa, Charlie XCX, ASAP Rocky and people like that. And I got scouted by Atlantic Records and moved over to there. So it's kind of been this continuation of intuition. Like, my intuition has been my through line of, when you say, like, how did you get to where you are? Because it is random, my career. It's always been opportunities and intuition coming up and like taking the leap. And if I'm looking at mapping what my purpose was from a young age, like if you look at all the highs and lows in your life, you can really start being like, oh, okay, this was training me for this. And I really feel now is where all of these trainings, so to speak, have kind of come into play, because how I can see the music industry, how I can see the advertising industry, and how I can see the investment industry, all a very like unique perspective from different views of if I just stayed in one career. So yeah, I can give you a more rounded view of my career if you want, but that's kind of what happened next, moving into the music industry from the advertising industry.
It's so cool. At what point, Lucy, did you sort of, I feel like there are moments in our careers where there are inflection points around either I'm on the right track, I'm making it, I've been able to buy XYZ. Like, there are these moments of breathing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in your case, obviously around security and safety, right? At what point did you start to feel like your work and your savings, like these were things that were starting to land with you? You started to breathe easier. Was there a job or a moment or something that you were able to do that made you go, wow, like I totally did that?
It's interesting you ask this, because it becomes a question of, is there ever enough? Because I have got through a lot of imposter syndrome, but I don't think I sit still for long enough to really realize what I have achieved. So it's kind of an alien concept, you saying that to me, because do I ever feel I can breathe? Yes, I do. I'm very peaceful in myself, but it's always about, like, there's a bigger challenge to now address. So it's never really I don't know, like, I can obviously go and take vacations and feel like absolutely fine that I'm not needing to like work in that period or whatever, even though I have my own business or whatever. But I just love my work, honestly. So I'm continually, I work with my friends, like I'll go on vacation, I'll suddenly find a client on vacation. Like I think, yeah, this success is obviously come, and I've like done great things in my career, but I'm always excited for the next thing. And right now, like, I'm really excited for our Aspen Institute collaboration, for example. So that feels like my next inflection point. So I'm not really thinking about things does that make sense?
Totally. It sounds to me like a moving goalpost, where you get the thing and then the bar gets higher and then you get, it's so funny because that is a very common thing that I've observed with just a lot of women, where we don't acknowledge our successes because of this moving goalpost. And more often than not, when we think about money, we think of, oh, I wish I did this, I should have done that. And not, oh my God, I was able to start buying an apartment when I was 24. Like, these are big, big accomplishments. So in your, like, during this tenure in the music industry, Obviously, when I think of, my background was in fashion. So when I think of industries where you work hard and don't get paid much, music tends to fall right alongside fashion, which is, they always say, you're so lucky to work here, and therefore, you should be happy with, whatever it is that you're getting. Did you, fare well on like negotiations or like how did you navigate like salary trajectories and really like building the salary that you wanted in that industry?
Going freelance was actually my biggest thing in terms of like wealth creation, because you had more freedom to work across different jobs. You get paid better, you'd have less responsibility. And that's when I created my company that essentially bridged talent and blockchain. So yes, I was at Atlantic Records. I then went and ran a label under Warner. But when I started taking more freelance stuff on, and then that expanded my vision of entrepreneurship and creating my own company. So working with talent when you actually own a stake in your business is where you can make more money in entertainment. If it really depends on what section that you're in, because yes, you were very right. I was never an artist or talent, and I think that is where it's really difficult in music. If you're on more of the exec side, it's not too there's not the same amount of budgets when you're working at labels as perhaps there is in advertising, but it's not too dissimilar. So yeah, it was taking control of, okay, cool. I have all of these relationships. I don't want to work for a corporation anymore. I really struggled working for corporations, honestly, the whole questionnaire thing of being told something to do. And I'm like, I don't think this makes sense. So entrepreneurship has kind of been more easier for me in that regard. So I started making more money when I created this talent agency that partnered blockchain and talent together. And in that time, I got nominated for top 10 entrepreneurs in the UK for NatWest, Coutts and The Telegraph, which is kind of like Bank of America, I guess, and Merrill Lynch. And they gave me all of this venture training. And they were like, this is fundraising. This is how to build a business correctly. And I was very I was figuring out, but it was costly lessons. So having this incubator was great. And it showed me another window into how to build wealth, how to fundraise for companies, how to essentially leverage debt to be able to make more profits in the long term. So yeah, I guess that's when changing to entrepreneurship within those industries was quite helpful.
It's amazing. I was going to ask you about, that big leap. I feel like you're extremely self-directed and self-aware. And so I feel like making that big leap may not have been as scary as some folks who are maybe a little bit more unsure of themselves as they launch into their first businesses. But this idea of sort of, now thinking about when you do start a company, how to pay for things and, think about sort of the what you bring in as an individual. Sometimes those P&Ls get blurred, between the business and the personal, and how do you kind of start to bridge that in your business when you started to really see things sort of pick up? Was it slow in the beginning? Was it sort of a really easy, natural transition for you? Had you thought about any sort of like financial cushion for yourself? I imagine you had some pretty good savings because you already a self-proclaimed saver. How did you sort of handle the first year scaries, I guess, of launching a new business?
Someone once told me that to always have like 20,000 in your account for like if things go wrong. And so I'd actually created that buffer before. Well, also, I got fired from Atlantic. So it was like a push off the cliff, essentially, because I would always stick up for the artists and they did not like that. It essentially made me question a lot. And yeah, they were like, do you want to be here? And I was kind of like, not really. And so, yeah, I had that savings in place. So then when I became freelance, I was always really like good friends with my artist team. So getting freelance work became quite easy from just relationship building and prior networks to what I'd already facilitated. And that, again, same, it was one of my clients that was freelance that hired me to run, when I was doing freelance work, they hired me to run a label for them under Warner. So I had a little bit of a buffer. I would be always saving and making sure that I am good. I even have that now, like this savings pot for if anything happens, I'm good, like for a few months or whatever. And then I kind of create different pots, like my savings pot and then my investment pot and my spending pot. So that was a good buffer. It probably took 2 months to get like good traction to back to the salary that I was at Atlantic. And then after
2 months?
that, yeah.
That's not long. That's like
No,
really
I know.
easy.
But I was like, you're freelance producing and freelance commissioning. It's a bit more flexible, particularly when you know a lot of the artists. And I think that a lot of producers in commissions, they don't know the artist. But when I actually got into music from an artist very randomly bringing me in, and my best friend like ran a label and things, so I created a really good network surrounding music, even though, so I pull on those contacts a little bit. And yeah, networking has always been my thing, surprisingly.
Yes, I feel like I need to have a whole nother episode about like Lucy's best practices on how to network your way through life and success. So what's so cool is that, as you were mentioning about this program you went through that helped you understand business in a new lens, it's such a gift. It's rare that I think people get access to great business information. There's obviously so much information out there, and much of it I don't think is always necessarily that great or that helpful, but to have such access at such a high caliber as you're sort of independently building your company, how did that impact the way that you saw this business that you were developing? Like, were you able to take tools directly from that for your company? Was it more sort of in service of the next thing you would build? Like, how did you start to incorporate or think about going from Lucy, the, let's call it more independent rogue business owner, to someone who was starting to think about things more formalized?
It was mentorship. So the NatWest, we did a Barclays incubator as well, but NatWest and Barclays, they gave us really structured how to run a business. Every week would be a different thing, like marketing your business, a structure of business, and those kind of things. Having a lawyer that kind of can be a good advisor, as much as, yes, like you need to pay for contracts and stuff, they do give you a lot of free advice before you even get to that point. So I'd kind of get a lot of principles from asking lawyers, actually, that were actually lawyers from my entertainment days, that kind of give me a bit of structure. My business partner now has taught me immensely. So having good mentorship. And I also listened to, surprisingly, this podcast, Diary of a CEO. And I'd get so much great insights from that on how to run a business and masterclass and things like that. That even now I'll still integrate a lot of those lessons. Or there was a book that I read as well that was, what was it? It's a startup book. I'm really blanking on the book name. It's got a yellow cover. But anyway, there was a lot of reading, listening, researching, and just asking a lot of questions to people that have done it before, and applying for programs like the Barclays Accelerator or whatever, so I could learn these things.
Cool. I love that. With this new venture that you're on, I would love to, it almost feels like, as you said earlier, this apex of, these components of your life coming together in something that feels almost like this is what it was all for, kind of a moment, this sort of synthesis of the networking, the relationships, also sort of creating towards a more equitable or better future, being able to notice things that you want to change and how you're starting to do that. Where did the idea come from? And how did you sort of go from, having one agency and one company to saying, all right, this needs to pivot and change. And I'm here to sort of think about the world in this far more deliberate, but also catalytic way, right? Because putting capital to use is, I believe, one of the most important things we can do if we want to see change in the world. So tell me a little bit about sort of this personal origin story and how things evolved.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like I started noticing my energy a lot more. So like when, for example, if I'd work with, there's a genre of music called drill, which is essentially about like killing people. And it's a lot about like ops and rivals and stuff like that. And one of the artists that I had was like very in that vein. And I think there was just a moral questioning of like, what am I doing? And then I would work with artists like Charlie XCX on her Boys video, and that was all about flipping the male gaze, and like I'd feel really charged from that. Or there was another artist I worked with that was focused on like anti-suicide and mental health, and so all of our creative was centered around that. And I just felt like my energy was so like much more lifted in that regard. And then what I wasn't working on that was aligned in my values, I could just feel like just intuitively not happy there. So like, firstly, learning how to read my energy and what worked for me and what didn't. Secondly, there was a book I read called you would pronounce it the Buddha and the Badass, but it's the book, like for me, it's the Buddha and the Badass, Vishen Lakhani, who founded Mind Valley. And in that book, every chapter gives you a exercise on how to think bigger. And you'll start the book with, okay, what's a big goal? Like, well, firstly, you map your purpose, your highs and lows in life, like what are your skill sets? And then it will get you to think of a vision. And by the end of the book, you're 100xing that vision. And that really fundamentally shifted my mindset into, okay, and it will talk about like how brands might, like there's certain brands that might be quite predatory in this world, and like, is it those brands that you want to work on and things like that. And it started making me much more conscious over who I was working with and what I was doing and how I was leveraging my skill sets. And then when I moved to America, I saw that a lot more, and I'd just be more intuitive over who I would work with. And so I started working with Ashley Bell, and so he used to run innovation and entrepreneurship for the White House, and his career is incredible. He's a huge change maker, ran Peace Corps for West Africa and many other things. And Dr. Bernice King, Martin Luther King's daughter, is his co-founder and everything. So I started working with them on Redemption Bank, which they were fundraising for at the time. And I just felt so aligned value-wise with everything that they were doing, and that how my time was being spent was just purely like creating change. And I really like the feeling I get from working with them and the vision that they have and how expansive it is, and how I really do feel that what we're doing can change the world. Like that, just I couldn't go back after that, quite honestly. It was just, everything else was kind of mind-numbing to me. I wasn't passionate about it, and luckily I could then generate clients within that realm that allowed me to keep in working for impact, essentially.
You know, it's so beautiful and powerful to hear your like the landing, right? It's like when you're in alignment with the kind of work you're supposed to do, it's there's something magical that happens, right? It's like all of a sudden the right people, the opportunities, the work that you're doing, I don't think it gets easier, but it becomes more satisfying. You know, there's a quality or a taste of like accomplishment that feels like it's putting in a brick into this, you know, building, and it's less like, you know, blowing a balloon and watching the balloon go away. You know, like it feels stronger, and it feels a lot more solid, which is what it sounds like you're telling me. So then from the formation then, and sort of how you guys started collaborating and putting together Just Us, you know, I think what's so interesting is, you know, this world that we are living in where, you know, investing and thinking about creating change, you know, living in San Francisco, I'll tell you that there's been, you know, we're now in a new bubble, you know, we're in a new AI bubble. And when we think about, you know, the AI of this, it's almost like we're walking through the Uberification of everything. You know, it's like there's like a whole new branding and taste and tenor. And not all of those applications or products that are being developed necessarily are landing towards a better future. They're sort of landing towards increased monetization future for the founder. And so that's sort of the world that I'm seeing in San Francisco is definitely the entering and emergence of a new bubble. But the work that you're doing is so centered on something that's powerful, which is connection and relationships and leveraging this born talent that you have, you know, around sort of seeing and identifying that. Tell me how Just Us has been structured, you know, and sort of what's making it unique and sort of your vision for what you're creating.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot in that, because the AI side of things, like you say, is very scary too. Fundamentally, I think most people do business, and actually most people operate in this world in their head. It's much more transactional. It's kind of like, okay, well, what do I get from this? Or it's not leading from a place of heart and wanting to connect. So I was being very drained by surface level small talk. Like, I think I went to LA Tech Week and everyone's like, hey, what's your name? Who are you? What do you do? Like, are you an investor? Are you like, it was very just like, I was exhausted, and I just felt like you're being like seen as a checkbook essentially, as opposed to a human that has values too. And so Just Us really kind of came from that mindset of how do we get people to connect on a heart level? How do we get people to care? Most people in this world do not care about others because they don't have emotional, physical safety in themselves. So like, how do we create more of a safe place for people to feel they have community, that they can share their thoughts and also have access to resources, to capital, to meet investors or founders on a level that is human and not transactional, but finding out who care, like what do each other care about, what's their value systems, what's important to them, what makes them tick, what's made them who they are, like that kind of stuff. Especially like when a lot of founders are getting investment, they don't realize that not all capital is good capital. And at the time, you may make that mistake of taking the wrong investor, and it might be fundamentally flooring for your business, or it becomes more about profit centers as opposed to impact, if that's the goal for you. Similarly to family offices as well, I get it quite a lot that people just try and pitch them all the time. So our dinners are where they really feel that people care about what they have to say and that they can get to know people on a human level, and it's not about like what they can offer the person. So just creating environments that lead from the heart was really key to me. And I really get drained by small talk. So I would watch a lot of documentaries and just find a lot of interesting points. And that's the conversations I'd have with investors. And I'd always get asked, like, do you want to grab coffee or whatever? And it made me realize that there's a unique place for real conversation. And if I can provide, because I never actually was fundraising for anything. So when I started doing these dinners, initially it was just from a place of creating community, understanding who should connect with one another and who would be really interesting energetically together, and then facilitating the environments around them. So that's kind of the core principles of Just Us. And now I really look at, even if people are not impact led, but they're deploying millions, billions, whatever it is, how do I get them to look at investments that are more impact led and doing more things for the world, but they're seeing it from their lens? And they may invest in something that is like climate tech, for example, that will have a really good exit, but it's creating impact. It's not a real estate or oil and gas deal that's not maybe doing as much for the economy. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm trying to just convert people over what impact investing really means, that it can be more profitable and just as aligned as venture portfolios. So yeah, I think I've answered your question, but let me know.
You did a great job, Lucy. I one of the things that really landed with me was when you said, creating rooms that are heart-centered. And in this space of money, you and I are very much aligned around that. There's something powerful that happens when you can relax, when you're in a room where you are both honored and you are given a space to be curious, where you can sort of dream together, where it's not transactional and you can build trust. These rooms that you're curating have that at the center of what you're building, and the rooms I'm curating have that at the center of what I'm building. And I think that is the new way in which capital gets to be really deployed and ways that are impactful, not just for the recipient of that capital, but for the person who's doing the investing. This is a two-way energetic exchange, and together everyone is creating the better future. So I think that's really, it's beautiful how you are curating this and how you're sort of putting heart at the center. The other thing that landed with me is, these days, I think we now have enough data points to be able to show that investing with your values and doing things impact driven do not have to mean that it's a charity.
Right. But people still think that.
I know, it is really wild, So for our listeners who are maybe going, Syama, I never heard you say that before. How do we sort of reconcile that? Do you, when you're sort of talking to investors and you're helping them see, how their capital can both create positive returns in the world and also positive returns for themselves and their bottom lines, how do you sort of frame that up for them?
I meet them where they're at. I'm always trying to find out, okay, what's their greatest need? What's their interest? What do they care about? What do they want their legacy to be? And I then am able to position an investment, because I speak to so many founders, and a lot of our family offices introduce us to founders that they're invested in as well. I kind of have a luxury of knowing this Rolodex of everyone's greatest needs, of all these companies that are doing various different things across sectors, that if someone says, for example, they care about the environment, or there's a really interesting deal we're investing in right now, for example. And her last company, 60X, this company is at the same stage, is over 12 times doing what that company did. And she's had 4 successful businesses. She's powerhouse, absolutely incredible. But she always starts with impact first. So her mission on everything is like, how do we get consumption down? How do we recycling? How do we keep the planet sustainable? And then she builds the business on top of that, and she builds the business model on top of that. And she has incredible returns. And so like when someone's saying, for example, in fact, this is a good example. I have an investor in this. We've done a syndication for this one, and it's been brilliant. But one of the investors, he's not an impact investor. He specifically told me he doesn't want anything to do with climate. And then he told me some other things of how he's looking for like high level returns, And so I invited him to a dinner we did for her. And so afterwards I was like, I know you're not interested in climate, but this is a really good deal for everything else that you're saying. So like if we took the climate element off and we looked at it as a deep tech element, would this then interest you? He's investing. So you're kind of looking at,
okay, well,
and like that makes me happy because now I've got someone that wasn't an impact investor in an impact investment that in a few years will probably see that impact investment outperform most things in their portfolio. And then they're thinking about, okay, that was an impact investment and that it wasn't a non-profit. So I'm just trying to reframe people's viewpoint in the way that they understand and that their interests are there.
I love it. That's so powerful. It's a great example. So now as you're sort of thinking about, the future, like what you're building towards. And obviously, I think when you're impact focused, you're almost sort of building legacy as you live your life, because it's like everywhere you look, you're putting deposits into a future that will yield into something beautiful. But as you kind of think about where you want Just Us to go, or where you want your impact and legacy to go, what are some of the things that you are thinking about with this body of work that maybe has yet to unfold, but that now seems far more clear, right? You definitely speak with the sense of not necessarily foresight, but intuition met with a lot of clarity.
I think it's about infrastructure now. So how do I create beyond just the capacity of myself? So yes, we can do these investments and we can do everything on a 1-by-1 basis, but what's the infrastructure that we need to build to create an even bigger legacy and to create even bigger impact? So, working on Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy is not a small place to be, essentially. So I like my business partner, Ashley, and what him and Dr. King come up with is just phenomenal examples of doing this. And so that's been really inspiring. So for example, the stuff we're doing a collaboration with the Aspen Institute. So for your listeners that might not know what that is, it's been around for 75 years. It's some of the most influential and intelligent people in the world that are just building for impact, essentially. So you've had people like Kamala Harris go through the program and various other people. And so this is a program where we will take people that have been significantly impactful in their career and influential. They're at inflection points where they can't seem to just break that next ceiling, or they may have had a really successful exit and they just feel more impact aligned. So Ashley came out of the White House, went into Aspen and created a bank that supported economic empowerment for women and minorities. So it's that level of person. So every year we will have 20 entrepreneurs of that caliber that come into our program and essentially are building businesses that address issues of nonviolence globally, and ideally for profit, which can be using capitalism and consumerism to drive profit as opposed to just nonprofit ventures, because we believe that's the evergreen cycle that is essentially needed to drive great change. So every year we'll have that program. We'll have 20 new entrepreneurs. Every year also we're partnering with the Aspen Resonate Action Forum, which essentially we're bringing in 30 family offices and key investors that really care about supporting these entrepreneurs. And we're launching them with an incubator of support before they've even begun their ventures and thought of their ventures that they're creating. So essentially, that's kind of how we're looking at legacy. How do we, like, say 10, 20 ventures come out of that every year, but they're from significantly influential people that can really think and build new systems and create change. that, and then we can build the investments surrounding them, and getting our community all together. Like, that's really where we're heading right now. That's the next rendition. And yeah, there's something really exciting coming up with Redemption Bank, which is Ashley and Dr. King's bank. I'm an investor in that. I'm not a co-founder by any means, but there's a credit card product to look out for around Juneteenth that is just phenomenal, and it really addresses global nonviolence and also addressing poverty into like real systems that can end poverty. So I work with very inspirational people.
I'd love to ask you, as far as, you mentioned you're an investor in Redemption, and, as you sort of think about your portfolio today, I feel like once you understand and think about venture and all these other asset classes, it's enticing, it's intimidating, you're always building a muscle. But as you sort of think about, where your assets are today, how do you sort of think about your own portfolio or investing? Are you bullish in certain areas? Is it still pretty risk averse in terms of how you think about, all right, I need my safety net and, I got to feel secure? Like, how are you sort of thinking about money, and what does money mean to you now?
It's funny. I'm actually very unrisk averse. I think I have my safety net, but in how I act in a daily kind of entrepreneurship, decision making and stuff is not particularly risk averse. It's intuition I go off, honestly. Like, I have a really, when I feel really called to people and to something in specifics, that's my initial thing. I have a great CIO in our company that then vets the investments for me, because I've made mistakes, put it that way, from investment in just like,
You're just building a muscle. You're building a muscle. You have to learn.
Right. But now our CIO behavior is great, and she vets everything and is just like, yeah, this is great. And so when we're looking at deals, my intuition actually has been really spot on for like this one that I was mentioning earlier that we're investing in. That one's been like way oversubscribed really fast. And I had the strongest intuition on that. And it didn't look the best on paper initially. And that one has done that's been the best one for us to get behind. So it's intuition. Do I feel really aligned with what the founder is doing? Do I think that the founder can achieve this, essentially? Or like, I generally can work out when people are transactional and in impact or philanthropy or whatever, and it's very self-serving. And I try and avoid those people and work with the people that are really leading from heart and just have almost the vision most of the time the vision is come from a higher source, and it just feels like it's being brought into this world through them. And this is a very airy, fairy, floaty, spiritual way of looking at investment. But if you are like that, put the right team around you to do the correct due diligence. But yeah, that's kind of how I've been looking at it. I don't really do anything with public markets. It's more like private investments that we're working with and founders that we're working with, and things that are coming into our network that I'll co-invest alongside our syndicates.
That's really awesome. It's exciting. I feel like the more women I talk to who are in venture, quite a few of them have been like, yes, I'm fully in venture, and I haven't diversified because I'm all in, and there's so much conviction of, building towards this future. And I think that there's something really powerful about feeling so aligned with the work that you're doing every day. Mm-hmm. So Lucy, tell me, obviously we are living so much longer now than ever. I imagine I will still be knowing you and having a coffee with you when we're 110 years old. But the landscape will look different. Hopefully we're still here on planet Earth if all of your investments go as correct as we plan. It will be a beautiful planet Earth. But as you sort of think about this world that you're creating and your own sort of personal thesis about life, and philosophical underpinnings, in this beautiful memoir that will be starting to be written in about 50 years, and we'll finish at about, we'll finish shortly after. What are some of the philosophical underpinnings that you believe are really driving your life and your trajectory?
A big one is treat, I can't remember the exact wording, but treat everybody how you wish to be treated. I really believe in karma, and I just try and act in good intention with every single person that I interact with. I really think that we are all one as a human race, and most people don't see that, and so they won't treat it like life as if they are interacting with themselves. But I think we win when we do that. So my mission is to try and get people to come together and act in love and act in heart, and just not allowing fear to take over their lives in various different forms, which I really think, I just see pain being passed to person to person to person. No one's sitting with it. How do we create more of a safer world for people to feel safe so that they can then care about others? When we look at like Maslow hierarchy of needs and things like that, people need safety. So that's a big part of where I would like to kind of be helping and bringing together more people to realize that and to come together and stop like fighting, stop like all these wars and stuff are insane to me. But that's where I would like to be. Let's see if it happens.
I love that. That's so beautiful. All right. My last two questions. We've talked a lot about money in terms of saving it, investing it, private markets. We talked a little bit about home ownership. But when you are sort of thinking about money today in a way that is fun and exciting, because we both know money can be fabulous and can afford us lovely experiences, things, etc. What is one of your most favorite recent purchases or, financial commitments, if you will, that has brought you the most joy? Like what's been the most fabulous thing?
Oh, interesting question. I just went to Costa Rica and I went on a retreat that was very focused on like presence and meditation, and just feeling at one with, realizing actually that human consciousness is not the predominant consciousness, and just understanding that. So that one's a very it's not like it was an expensive purchase, put it that way, but I felt like I really got a lot of seeing life in a different way and being able to be more present, and ultimately conserve more energy for better things in doing so.
I love that. That's beautiful. And then my last question is, what are you calling in right now? What can we, the audience, do for you? What do you need? What do you want?
I am calling in the right aligned partnerships for our Aspen program. So founders, investors, donors that can really take the mission to another level, and just have a like-minded mindset.
I love that. Wonderful. Lucy, thank you so much for being here today on Getting Rich Together. Thank you for sharing your vision of the world, your spirited heart. I feel like if I have this podcast a year from now, you're going to be like, and then there was this incredible thing, and I met this amazing person, and it's led me down these other tracks. And so you are definitely one to look out for, I would say. And I'm so thrilled and honored that you shared a little bit of your incredible story with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Syama. I really appreciate you and all that you're doing.
Thank you for listening. This is the conversation we come back to every single week. Real women, real wealth, and what becomes possible when we stop being silent about money. If today's episode moved you, don't let it stop here. Wealth Catalyst is where women go to take it further. Our Freedom Tour salons are gathering women in 32 cities this year. Intimate evenings in homes and private spaces where women talk honestly about money, risk, and what they're building. And if you're ready to go even bigger, join us at the Wealth Catalyst Summit, a full-day event in San Francisco this October. Find your city and claim your seat at wealthcatalyst.com. We'll see you there.